Hello, everybody. Welcome back. You are on phase 2 of the Value Up Culture Building System. This is going to be an exciting one. We are talking about seeing the gold, cultivating student self worth and culture with a value based approach. This is a very important lesson. It's actually probably the most important lesson in the whole course because if this isn't part of your reality, or if you don't see this concept, it's not going to go anywhere because honestly, the value up approach is that every student has value no matter what. And we don't live in a world that really reinforces that. So to go back to that as a core belief is very important. And that's going to make more sense as we get going in this because I really do believe that teenagers, they, like we've been talking about, they act out how they feel about themselves, right? If a student doesn't really value themselves, they don't act valuable. And so we're going to really break that down and see how we can help each individual student in the world we live in see that they have value. One of the things we do right away with students when they're reading the book or they're going through our courses is to help them go through an evaluation process, right? So in our Value Up course for students, we ask them to rate themselves on the high or low side of one of these descriptions of self-worth. And the results are really eye-opening. So yeah, we asked them to pick a high side or a low side of one of these descriptions. And this first one is 1 or 2. I don't like myself. I see very little value in my life. I get irritated by people who act like they're better than me. 3 or 4 is I don't like a lot about myself, but I know there are some good things. I often compare myself to others. 5 or 6 is I feel okay about life, but I'm not really happy. I have doubts about my worth, and I often feel others are better than me. 7 and 8, I know I'm not perfect, but I recognize my strengths. I see value in my life and get along with most people. And then 9 or 10, I have a healthy view of who I am. I like where I'm going. I'm secure enough not to be threatened by other people's differences. I like most people. These are more than just numbers. They're indicators of belief, and belief shapes every interaction, every classroom moment, and every decision a student makes about their future. When young people don't feel valuable, they don't act valuable. A couple of years ago, I talked to 2 separate students in 2 separate states, and after I compared the notes and just the experience that I had, it was really obvious to me that even though these are 2 different people and obviously 2 different backgrounds, they were getting the same message. And I want to kind of break that down. You know, there was Corey and Chelsea. Let me tell you Chelsea's story first. So I'm in Missouri and I get done speaking at the school, and this counselor comes over to me and points at this girl. The kids were still in the gym because they hadn't been released yet. And so he points at this girl and he said, listen, would you mind going over and talking to her? Because, you know, she doesn't cry at all. I mean, I've known this girl since, beginning of high school, and she's a senior now and never cries, but I saw her during your assembly tearing up. And so would you mind talking to her? And he goes, a little backstory on her is that she has a straight A scholarship. So she got straight A's all the way through high school. And now, because I guess the state of Missouri says you can go to any school you want statewide. So she, has that opportunity, but is not going to take advantage of it. So he was like, could you, go talk to her? So yeah, I mean, I went over there, and first thing she said to me, I said, my name is Mike. She said, I hate truck stops. And immediately I knew this girl was, going to try to throw me off my game because, she didn't want some hustler coming over and, talking to her, So I said, I played stupid. I was like, why do you hate truck stops? And she goes, because my mom's a truck stop whore. And immediately, again, I'm like, this girl is shock value. She's trying to shock me to make me go away, but she doesn't know me. So I'm like, that's like putting meat in front of a dog. I'm like, so what's a truck stop whore? I knew what it was, but I wanted her to talk about it. And as she unpacked it, I mean, it was sad. It was just a sad story of, brothers and sisters having to be in the backseat of the car while she was doing homework with them, while the mom was, talking to the truck drivers. And, she said anytime they needed food or they needed, an appliance would go out in the house, she was down at the truck stop. So what a sad existence. And that was really strong. I talked her up a little bit and coached her a little bit and gave her a copy of my book and, tried to do what I could. But the same year, I was at a private school in Pittsburgh. It's actually called Shadyside Academy. It's where the Rooney's, the people that own the Pittsburgh Steelers, send their kids to this school. It's a palace. I mean, the place is posh. It's just beautiful. And so I'm speaking at this school, and when I was done with the assembly, there was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of kids coming up to me and talking to me about the pressure they felt. But there was one kid that kept looking in the room at me. And so I went over there, and finally I'm like, dude, you want to talk to me? And he's like, yeah. He goes, but I just don't want to do it in front of everybody. So, okay. So we go out in the hallway, and first thing he says, I'm self-medicating. I talk about that in my presentation. He said, I'm self-medicating. I said, with what? And he said, with drugs and alcohol. And he goes, I'm starting to worry myself, which told me, he was going down a rabbit hole and he was a little worried about himself. So I said, why are you doing that? And he said, most kids that go to this school want to go home on the weekends. It's partially a boarding school. And he said, but I don't. And I said, why? And I was expecting to hear some kind of abuse situation with his stepdad or something, right? But this is what he said. He said, because they're not home. He goes, I pull into the driveway and it's dark. It's a big house. We live in a mansion. But he said, I go in and there's a $50 bill sitting on the counter with a note that says, go get yourself something to eat. We're not going to be here this weekend. We're doing this. We're doing that. And this is what he said. He goes, they forgot that I'm their kid, which I don't think they did, but he felt that way. And by the way, this kid had a full ride scholarship to Holy Cross to play lacrosse. He was a stud. I mean, this kid was a stud muffin and seemingly had it all together on the outside, but he didn't, right? These are two different stories with the same message. There's two different stories with the same message. They were both getting the message that they weren't valuable to people that were very important to them. These are the key takeaways from Chelsea's and Corey's story. Number one, every student is getting messages. Whether it's a straight A student with a past like Chelsea or an athlete from an affluent family like Corey, external success or compliance doesn't equal internal wellness. Those internal messages are doing more damage than we think. Number two, behavior can be a signal. Bad behavior equals bad belief. Defiance, disengagement, and even hostile language are often masks that hide deeper wounds and negative self-perception. When a student pushes away connection, it's often because they feel unworthy of it. Number three, people tend to communicate with their actions. Abuse, neglect, emotional absence, or even well-meaning but distracted parenting can all send the same destructive message. You're not worth treating with care. This belief corrodes a student's self-worth from the inside out. Value messages are really important. I know for me, growing up in Boston and the dysfunctional family that I was in, it really, as I look back, there was a lot of messages that I got through actions that said, you're not valuable. Obviously, my dad leaving was a huge message. You're not worthy of me staying here, or spending time with you. And then he disappeared as well. So he didn't even try to reach back and, be in our lives. That was a huge value message to me. Also, just the abuse in our home, from my mom, but also her siblings and, her parents. There was just a lot of neglect and then some abuse that happened with us. And those were violent value messages. They said to me, you're not valuable. And I didn't realize this at the time, but that was doing psychological damage to me. Psychological research consistently shows us that our identity is deeply shaped by the environments we grow up in. Developmental theorists like Erik Erikson emphasize that identity formation begins in early childhood and is shaped by the messages we receive from parents, caregivers, and culture. Ling Chi is a Chinese torture technique, which basically it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? Many students experience emotional Ling Chi, the slow drain of value through subtle, persistent messages of unworthiness. These cuts may be overlooked by adults, but are devastatingly real to the student. There are two dangerous value messages that I want to talk about that teenagers are getting today. Number one, I have to perform to be valuable. Teens often come to believe their value is tied to meeting others' expectations, whether through appearance, grades, achievements, or social acceptance. Over time, this mindset weakens their sense of intrinsic worth and leaves their self-esteem dependent on external approval. They feel like they can never achieve enough. Vulnerability to peer pressure. That's what happens when you can't achieve enough. You become vulnerable to peers, right? With a weak internal compass, teens are more likely to look outward for validation, making them more susceptible to negative peer influence or toxic social environments. A hungry need is a dangerous need. A couple years back, I was a youth pastor in Denver, and I had a whole football team coming to my youth group on Wednesday nights, and they would come right from practice. And so I knew they were hungry, and so I ended up buying them a pizza one night. I bought them all pizza, but I put most of the pizza in the back, and I brought one out, and I auctioned it off at first just as a fun little illustration. And they ended up buying the pizza, $65 for a $12 pizza. And then I gave them the money back, and then I brought the pizza out and fed the whole team. But the illustration that night was a hungry need is a dangerous need, right? A hungry need is a dangerous need. When you're hungry for something, you'll pay more for it, right? So I think that comes down to value. When people don't feel valuable, they don't act valuable, and they chase it, right? They're looking for it in different places, right? Girls will date the bad guy. Guys will get into some, bad behavior and bad choices. Everybody does, right? It's like, I'm looking for something to fill that desire to be valued, and that gets you in trouble, right? So a hungry need is a dangerous need. The second really dangerous value message that young people are dealing with today is the idea that I can't be real with anyone. Many children develop a false self, like a fake self, to gain approval and avoid rejection, hiding their authentic identity. This false self can lead to low self-worth, especially if teens feel their true self doesn't meet external expectations, which then leads to imposter syndrome, right? When the fake self, false self, becomes dominant, teenagers can feel like imposters. Even when they succeed, it doesn't feel real because they're performing, not being. This leads to anxiety, perfectionism, or people-pleasing behaviors. And then your authenticity is incredibly suppressed, right? Teens may hide their real emotions, preferences, or talents if they believe those parts aren't acceptable. This disconnect from their true self leads to confusion, frustration, and even depression. Okay, so this may seem like it's not going to fit, but trust me, it's going to. July 16th, 1999, JFK Jr. was killed along with his wife and her sister in a plane crash in Massachusetts. This was really interesting to me because I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and the Kennedys are huge. And so this was all over the news, and I was paying attention to it. And all the speculation is that he was a young pilot. He was flying from New York to Martha's Vineyard, got lost in the clouds, and ended up, ditching the airplane in the ocean, but he died. And so there was all this speculation that he didn't know his instruments, and, he fudged his test because he was the president's son, all this stuff. And so I was sitting next to a pilot a couple days later, and I asked the guy, I said, hey, do you know why JFK Jr. crashed his plane? He said, I know exactly why. I said, was it because he wasn't trained on his instruments? He said, no, you can't be a pilot. It doesn't matter who you are without being trained on your instruments. He said the problem is that young pilots don't trust their instruments. He said, you get up in the clouds, you're going 180 miles an hour in these small planes. He goes, you'll just swear to God that you're to the left, or you're upside down, or you're different than what your instruments are reading. And, you're like a pilot tapping the instruments like there's something wrong. Like I feel like I'm like this, but it's telling me I'm like this. And I started thinking about how spatial disorientation is what teenagers go through, right? They don't really know their instruments. They don't know they're valuable. They don't know that they have that steady anchor that says you are valuable no matter what. So because of their life being so crazy, we talked about it, right? Their biology is changing, relationships are changing, their social worlds become huge. They get out of balance. They get like to the left, to the right, and they start making decisions based on how they feel and not who they really are. And so that gets really dangerous. Just as pilots can experience spatial disorientation, trusting their inner sense of direction over their instruments and flying straight into danger, teenagers in emotional distress often rely on unstable feelings instead of grounded truth. Teens may seem fine on the outside while silently spiraling on the inside. While their emotional visibility is clouded by social pressure, anxiety, or identity confusion, they often manage an image to stay in control. So to me, teaching and modeling intrinsic value is the stabilizer they need. Teens are bombarded with messages that their worth depends on performance, appearance, or approval. Value Up educators have a unique opportunity to speak against that tide and help students understand that value is intrinsic, not earned or lost. Value Up educators are like flight instructors. That's a crazy picture. Like pilots, they need clear instruments, consistent support, emotional safety, and unconditional worth to keep them steady. Understanding intrinsic value. The idea that every person has intrinsic value, value that is built in and unchangeable, can come from many different sources. For some, it's rooted in personal faith. Still others find reassurance in the words of the Declaration of Independence: all men are created equal. At the heart of Value Up is one simple truth: everyone has equal value, and your value is intrinsic. Solid gold value. Imagine I hand you a solid piece of pure gold. Now tell me, how do you remove the value from it? You can't. The value is part of what it is. It belongs to itself. Now imagine we drop that gold in the mud, we scratch it, dent it, beat it with a hammer. Maybe it no longer shines. Maybe it doesn't look valuable anymore. But guess what? It's still gold. It's still valuable. Even if it feels or looks worthless, its value has not changed. You are that gold. No matter what's happened to you, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter how others have treated you, your value is built in, and no one can take it from you. That means your value is not based on your performance, popularity, appearance, or social status. Your value is built in. It doesn't change even if life gets hard, messy, or painful. Knowing your intrinsic value is like reading the right instrument panel. If you rely only on emotion, you may feel lost or unstable, but your worth does not move, and that's your anchor. Notice how I put that in the first person, because I want you to understand that as well. You know, we're talking about kids and we're talking about helping them see their value, but I wonder about you. I wonder if you see your value. I wonder if you're in that whole game of trying to, earn your value and chase your value. And I want to encourage you. It's going to be really difficult for you to help kids see that they have intrinsic value if you don't know you do. So maybe, as you're doing these lessons, you take some time to look at you and for your own mental health, right? To me, when people ask me, Mike, what's mental health to you? Well, mental health is that. It's me focusing on my instruments, focusing on the truth about me. There's all kinds of different variables that come in, right? Stuff from my past, my value messages I got from my mom and from my dad leaving, and all that kind of stuff, and people along the way that said things and did things that, brought negative value messages to me. But the whole time that was happening, there was a truth about me. The truth about me was that I was always valuable. I never lost it. It belonged to me. And I'm not chasing value anymore. I'm walking in it. But that's a daily process. Like daily, I sit on my bed and I tell myself, the truth about me. I go back to my instruments and I say, okay, Mike Donahue, you today have to walk in that value, walk in who you are. And that's really important. So I want to encourage you, as you're doing this, like I said, to look at your own life and to, make those choices, because you're going to end up giving this away to kids. The best thing I can do for me, or actually the best thing I can do for kids, is to take care of me and to make sure that I know that I'm incredibly valuable. So thanks for watching this lesson. I will see you in the next one. Make sure you do the survey over here. I never can tell what it is, but definitely do the survey, and we will see you in the next lesson. Bye.